Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. This is the next activity of MH Division which we are conducting today in this lecture theatre. To begin the proceedings, I would first like to call upon Dr. Madam to kindly address you. Thank you.
Address sounds rather a big word. But welcome and thank you so much for coming here today. We're waiting on Dr. Pandya, who had an emergency surgery. He's on his way and should be coming. Just give you a brief background about this whole unit. We have Dr.M.V.L.Kothari, chair in Humanities that has been established, which the first person who has honoured us by accepting this chair is Dr.Sunil Pandya. And I think we all are counting our blessings on that because he's a person who really can guide us in humanities and ethics. We have planned a few activities for the whole year, primarily focusing on students. But Sir Dr. Pandya also felt that it's important that faculty get involved in this activity on a larger scale, and that's why this program today, that faculty also participates, and it's not really going to be a talk, and I'm just actually whiling time till some comes. If anybody wants to talk, that's also equally welcome. But the idea is, and that is what we have written, is that we should have an interactive discussion. And it's about professionalism, it's about where without professionalism. And in today's day and age, in today's circumstances, how can we apply it? You know, I used to work a lot in Ayurveda, I remember, and I feel like talking about it just now, although it may be completely unrelated. When Dr. Damanuka was there and I was working with her, and I remembered that many people used to ask us, what's the relevance? The relevance of doing research in Ayurveda now, as much as it was then, was that the people with whom and the society and the circumstances in which we use Ayurveda is completely different, in the same way as professionalism. Society is different, and how do we as medical professionals live in this society, and do we apply different rules for ourselves? These are the thoughts that occur to me when we talk to undergraduate students. It's easy for me to say you should do this, but for that person to actually practice some of these things that we preach, we have to make it realistic enough so that they are able to practice. And I think I can find no more words than this. We need to wait for Sir to come. In the meantime, if there is any thoughts that you all have, especially Padmaja, would you like to introduce Sir, so those who don't know him, which I think will be very few, maybe you can do that. Melanie is introducing Sir.
For that, I wanted to just tell about. As Madam said, if you're focusing on students, why should the staff members be here? It's because it's our mandate to guide our students to start looking at patient not as disease entity but as a whole human being, and to explore the connections between how the health-seeking behavior of a patient, which is molded by the philosophy, religion, which are all humanities actually. These are all the branches of humanities: philosophy, religion, sociology, art. How those things, the beliefs of patients, belief systems of patients, mold their health-seeking behavior, and how we as individuals help them to attain their best social, physical, mental, spiritual health, like WHO definition. So, and world over, what has been happening is this medical humanities has been established as a training module or a course where there are actually degrees offered in that, and there they invite students to explore the aspects which are linked to these sciences and medical science, and that's how we have started it here. For some time, ours was a loosely structured effort. Dr. Ravi Ramakanthan had encouraged us to do this, and as Madam said, Dr. Kothari, because Dr. Kothari has been one person who has explored these links between these sciences and medicine for the longest time, and with enthusiasm which was unsurpassed. So it was apt that the chair be started in his name, and that's how Dr. Kothari chair has been installed. And Dr. Pandya is the first MLK chair. So this is what we look at it like, and hence today's talk, which is directed at faculty and their discussions generated on this talk. That is one part. And Nandini will give you an idea of introduction to Dr. Pandya.
Good afternoon, senior faculty, dear friends. It's my privilege to introduce Dr. Sunil Pandya, consultant neurosurgeon to you. I'd rather have done the introduction when sir was here, but do this anyway. So sir, as you know, is the first chair of the Dr.M.V.L.Kothari Chair of Medical Humanities at our institute, guiding the activities of the Medical Humanities Division. Sir was professor and head at our very own institute from the Department of Neurosurgery, which he joined in 1975 until he superannuated in 1998. Needless to say, he has mentored scores of neurosurgeons who now practice across the country and overseas. Sir is an alumnus of the Grant Medical College and Sir J.J. Group of Hospitals, where he obtained his MBBS, MS and training in neurosurgery. Further on, he trained at the Institute of Neurology at London. But what distinguishes Dr. Pandya is his passion for medical ethics and the history of medicine. He is a crusader for ethical practice and all issues pertaining to ethics in medicine. He serves on the editorial boards of several journals and is the emeritus editor of the Indian Journal of Medical Ethics. He is currently penning a book on the history of J.J. Group of Hospitals, which is to be published by the Oxford Press. His lectures on the history of anatomy, I am told, have enthralled students year after year after year, right from 1982 for over 2 decades, way after he superannuated from our institute. A clinician par excellence, patient listener. His interaction and communication with his patients have learning lessons for all of us. But most importantly, he is a person who practices the values he teaches. Simply clad, preferring public transport, remaining up to date with the latest advances in science and medicine. Here is a person who actually walks the talk. I was told he would be embarrassed if I give him such a large introduction, so maybe it could have got over that part. It is rightly said, your attitude and not your aptitude will determine your attitude. So today he is going to present a topic which is so relevant and so contemporary. The issue of professionalism in medicine. And like Dr. Padmaja and Dr. Tatya said before me, we'd like it to be interactive, and I'm sure that Sir will be inviting discussions after he presents his deliberation. Thank you so much.
To have Dr. Dinesh Daftari with us, who has been fast friend of Dr.manu Kothari since 1964 till he passed away. And he has been a leading professional person. So till such time Dr. Sunil Pandya can make it, we are going to hear him how a professional person faces the dichotomy of taking care.
I'm here now. Lopamat has introduced me as a very good friend of Manu and Kothari. The words come into my in my mind today when yesterday I was reading something. There are 2 things in life guide you. One is niti, other thing is niyati. I think it applies both here. We are discussing the niti and the niyati, destiny brought me here today. And I need to speak to the galaxy of the professionals who have come here. Somebody spoke earlier that the times have changed, situations have changed, circumstances have changed, and therefore the thinking is bound to change. And whatever the professional thinking that we have, of course, will be certainly influenced by the circumstances. I remember once in a biography of Samir Patel, Samir Patel was quoted to have told the princess to unite together and give up their kingdom and join the Indian Congress. What he said was very clear, because you are always the rulers. So come to Congress and start rolling back the country that you need to rule because you belong to the country. And then he made a very prophetic statement. If the circumstances, if you don't take care of the circumstances now, circumstances will take care of you. And this is possibly something that is happening in our profession today. Look, I'm a dental professional. I've been working in the field of oral precancer cancer. In my established base was Tata Institute for Fundamental Research. So from that angle, I had an exposure of people, faculty in different places in the world as well as in India, and our dental institution. In dental institution, let me tell you something. The world's 1/3 dental schools are in our country. So if there are 1,000 dental schools in the world, more than 333 would be in this country. And it's unfortunate that I have to make a statement that the teaching part, mentoring part, understanding the profession and what needs to be done is certainly has a lot of lacuna. Therefore, a person who walks out of the dental profession has probably not much of a clue, and I really sympathize with that kind of a professionalism, that what do they do? And therefore, I always feel that people who join the dental profession are done with a lot of expenses. And we hear a lot of people committing suicide. Even in North, where I was speaking in one of the institutions, half the people who graduate with the BDS degree, they don't even register their qualifications with the Dental Council of India. And some of them are looking for jobs in different places. So it's a very difficult situation that you're sitting in, but the fact remains the ethical part of the profession cannot be brushed aside or cannot be put under the carpet. We were fortunate that we went through those days and times where we knew what the profession is about and we had some professionalism in ourselves. But to preach somebody today and tell to follow certain norms, I can always be counter-questioned by somebody who feels very different. And another funny thing about, if you look at those Indian TVs, sometimes you look at the advertisements, that the father and mother are talking about it, I need to take a loan for my daughter or son going to be a doctor. And you know how it goes about it. So he said, do we have money to pay for this? So the mother says, but मेरा बेटा डॉक्टर बन जाएगा फिर अपने को कोई तकलीफ ही नहीं है. Now this is a kind of an image of a doctor that has in the society, and this is the kind of an image which a doctor carries with himself. That once he gets a medical degree, the doors are open, society will be at his command, and he shall be what he is. And you know, the whole thing goes around evaporates. But the crux of the matter is, even if you take the money, let's put it this way, but the person who comes in with an education should be able to get the kind of education which he is aspiring to be, which makes him a good professional. I remember in Kerala, my colleague Dr. Prabhu, who is from Australia, who came from Manipal to study with us in our hospital college. And he came from that background of society, but he has made it very good. In Kerala, when I was there the other day, right, I asked him about the same thing about the doctors who are joining the colleges. I'm sure you're all aware of how many dental medical schools are opening in India. But he said that doctor, in a big practice, so we were discussing with me about education and things. He says, he was very clear in his pandas. He says, sir, I am buying the degree. That I know. I'm not buying an education. I'm buying a degree. I'm paying the money. I know my son will get a degree. And then it is up to me, for me to figure it out how best it will be taught. Now these are the people who will make good, simply because they have a backing of profession, money. And he doesn't really have to worry about anything. But then there are enough numbers who are aspiring to be doctors and who want something with that. I had sent one article, it was Professional Medical Journal of AMC, D.R.SUPE. There was a psychiatrist who wrote an article, I think I have circulated. I gave it to Dr. Sunil Pandya. she was bold enough to write when she started the practice what she went, how everybody advised her to take commissions and so forth. I mean, it is very open discussion. And she wrote very boldly the entire article of her career, that when she went in, what happened, how she got out of the situation, how she stuck to her guns, and what is she now and how did she achieve it. But then there may be very few who might get into the system. But the fact still remains, this is an issue where you can't keep it under the cover. And majority of the people will have to possibly take an opinion. I remember once I was with Dr. Anita Borges. He was speaking at something on like this ethics. There was a continuing education course on Olympic cancer and she was talking on something else. And she referred to this point of what you call it, the referral money and things like that. There was a young lady sitting in front of our audiences and she picked up and asked Anita directly, "Hey, Madam, am I not supposed to make money? Are you telling me that?" But she didn't answer. He said, "Those questions, of course, I can't answer. But this ethics business should have been there before you joined the profession." Now, why do I always maintain that every time, earlier time in the national college, I would possibly like to give a form to a student that why he is joining a dental or medical institution. And some of these answers can be very revealing. But today also, even if you were to give a form to an institution, yeah, why are you joining this institution? And you possibly will be surprised at what answers might get out of it. Because everything that happens in the medical or dental profession, I mean, dental profession is too small compared to medical profession, but it will touch the society at large, patients at large, and people at large. Many years back in Amsterdam, there were only 2 MRI units in the entire city of Amsterdam. Now, if you look at the whole thing around in Bombay City, what happens? Even in a South Bombay, a small place, a few kilometers distant, we have nothing like 9 to 10 hospitals. You go to a hospital, there are 250 registered consultants. Now what I'm telling is not something new. I'm sure all of you are pretty aware of what's happening in that sense. Dr. Sunil Pandya and medical ethics and humanities people here sitting there probably will have to figure out how best these things to be transmitted to the graduates, to the school curricula, or to the postgraduates and the residents themselves. So the fact remains, if this, as I said before, cannot be kept or cannot be brushed aside and not happened. I think I'm express my point of view, which are very, very topical, but needs to be discussed. Thank you very much for asking. Thank you.
Say something, just and then wind up.
It's sheer coincidence that Dr. Sunil Pandya was so punctual. He just phoned me up at 2:45. Look, I had to attend this emergency and I'm leaving right now. Of course, it was with Bombay traffic, which is sort of blocked it. Doesn't matter. Now, as we analyze the word ethics, if we carefully pay attention to the word, it comes to that you are deciding between your right brain and left brain. Your left brain is most rational. It converts everything into most rational thing. It justifies everything. It is essentially for I, me, and myself. Of the goal which you have decided you want to achieve. You have made up your mind that that is the right goal. And yena kena prakarena, you can reach that. And the end matters, means don't matter. And that's where our left brain logical brain comes to our rescue and it justifies. That if I seek, if I'm waiting at the counter for buying a ticket, if I happen to know somebody and I can request him, can buy for me also, so I get my ticket earlier, and that's the right thing to do because I know that person, I will be saving my time. And right brain somewhere hurts that all those people who are waiting in the queue also are equally important, but that right brain is suppressed. But that right brain wakes up when you go to sleep. That is where it tells you where you think of I instead of we or us, that never suits you. It's only when you take care of everybody, because we always includes I never includes we. If we have to pay attention to our major tenet, Vasudha eva kutumbakam, then if you take care of everybody else, you are automatically taken care of. But that right brain is usually not paid attention when we are actively engaged in our various kind of pursuits. The right brain only sounds when we are at ease. And hence, today morning only I was telling Dr. Shelby that I find it very paradoxical that when we didn't have phone, there was a question of mobile or computer or anything. But at that time, somehow we felt that there was time for everything. We were relaxed from within. Because of lack of rapid communication, I am digressing a bit, when the phone was invented, then they came to know that the divorce rates went up after the phones were invented. Because earlier, because you could not communicate with each other, when some rift took place, there was a gap. And that time usually time heals. But when you can really give back the answer, so telephone as a means of communication equally became a rapid means of miscommunication. In the same way, all these applications on mobile and whatnot have taken us away from ourselves. And that is where right brain is getting further and further suppressed. And that's why, though we all know what is right and what is wrong, but what is wrong also we learn to justify. And that is why this problem of split fee, referral, asking for number of investigations which are not required. All these come into practice because most of the private hospitals have become industrial complexes. There, what you are a most efficient professional person depending on how much you generate your funds. And everybody justifies that if I do not do this, somebody else is going to do it. Another thing is, of course, malpractice insurance. That also makes everybody play safe. So with all that, So, it is finally ethics boils down to paying attention to your own self and decide what is your priority or what is your value. Nobody else can decide. Ultimately, we all live only with ourselves, with nobody else. Welcome, Dhruv. Now, what I want you, what we would have done afterwards, can we start with the problems which all these youngsters who are now going to go into practice are facing their problem? Can they come up here and discuss? I would request them to come now. Can you? Please come. You're most welcome. It's an open forum, open discussion.
Smriti. Yes, will you start?
Difficult, but if to put things into perspective, as in most of us have been telling our experiences about professionalism, and as Sir said, the changing times and context. So what we thought is, if in the audience people could share their thought process about what they think professionalism is and what is their critical challenges which they feel is to practice that professionalism which they think is probably the correct method of practicing their profession in their mind. Probably we could sort of take it from there. So anyone, how do you think your profession, what do you feel is the ideal professionalism for you? Anyone? I'm sure with changing times and contexts, there are n number of challenges to it. We read a lot, we think a lot, but to be able to practice this, I think, so that's the real challenge. And there is where we are looking forward to, as in what challenges do we feel as faculty and which probably could help us in sort of sorting it out. Anyone would like to share their? Ma'am, what do you feel is the biggest challenge in practicing professionalism the way you feel?
I have never practiced outside, only in a full-time practice. So I only look at my department and the services my department provides. And I feel a sea change in the newer generation, the way they look at things and the way the senior faculty looks at. Say, for example, we have shortage of manpower for donkey's years. Like, we are used to it, and we never think second time before any task needs to be completed, we pitch in. The thought also never comes whether this is my work or XYZ's work. But today's youngsters, they always feel, why am I being asked to do this? This is not my job. And if somebody else tries to explain them, even the HOD is doing it, like, what's your problem? Do it. Well, that's her problem. Let her do. If she thinks, let her continue to do it, I'm not going to do it. That somewhere there is a conflict. I don't know how to tackle it. And we try to motivate people to say that always you do not look at things that I will do it so that I will get this. Do not all the time think of the result. You just do it, and whatever work you do will never go unnoticed. But that is not happening.
Yeah, as Madam has put it, we have to keep in mind that we are talking to professionals here who are working probably in an institutional setup and also in private, and from an institutional point of view, as Madam is saying, is sometimes the results, as she says, everyone wants results to be immediate, tangible. What's the immediate result to me? And as she's saying, that's the biggest, one of the challenges for a behavior, how people start thinking about it. Madam, would you like to share anything?
Actually, I don't know, today's generation is, I think, more ready than us, more smarter than us, at least me, and they are more efficient. And probably if this approach what Madam has talked about is there is because of what they have gone through during their training and all that, because their training times have been harsher on them than what our training times were probably, and the challenges that they have faced, say from 9th standard, 10th standard, actually now this topic is going somewhere else probably, but they are more efficient, and if a little feedback is given, they will turn out to be much better professionals than if we were to go into. Now this about professionalism, the term, we are looking in say institutional practice, how I come across to my patient is also, that also is professionalism, and actually what happens in practice, like all this discussion on fee splitting, etc., that is another aspect. That is not where means I can't speak about that because I do not practice, but that mentoring or that finishing school approach, that is not there in our current training. That is required. How one should be facing patients, and I don't think we actively give feedback in a way a young student or a postgraduate will require as to, no, this is what you said could have been different, or this is the way it could have been put, or something of that sort. Maybe that is going to hone their skills and make a good finished product.
Anyone else would like to share any other opinions on their thought process on professionalism? I'm sure there are some things which we have standards for, but there are so many other things which we keep defining ourselves. For example, this probably is correct in this context, and in current times, as sir was saying about monetary benefits. Now we can't probably separate out the fact that money is important for people. So we can't keep saying and preaching or probably telling that don't think about money here. Probably it is a factor. The only thing is one has to take a call as to how much that fact has importance in one's mind. So I don't know. These are some aspects, I think, so which always bring question marks into our minds when we say monetary benefits or ethics, and the schism between how to balance between ethics and medico-legal issues and all those aspects which come into picture when you're dealing with patients. We talk about ethics and then medico-legal issues, and then there's a whole gamut of defensive medicine and all that. So these all are very important aspects as far as we as professions go. I don't know how other people look at this, because these are some questions which keep coming to us. Like we are told to not prescribe, these medicines, or advice for investigations, and then there is a whole gamut where you have this RTIs coming up, and then people say, why was this not done? So I don't know. These are troubles. These are questions which keep troubling me at times. How to even answer probably the person I am mentoring as to, I don't have answers. I don't know whether people in the audience have some answers in mind regarding these questions, and do they have, or these things trouble us still? Anyone? I'm sure gynecology colleagues can tell us, because they are some who keep facing these issues a lot, isn't it?
Actually, in our OPD, when we see so many patients that come to us, usually gynecology patients, they have 1 by 1 centimeter fibroid on the fundus of the uterus, no bleeding, no nothing. USG report suggestive of a small sitting fibroid, and they go to 5-6 hospitals. Everybody advises them hysterectomy. They come to us, we tell them nothing needs to be done. They actually laugh at us that whether really nothing is to be done, because we have gone to 5-6 private doctors and all. So it becomes really difficult for us whether we should what this thing, whether they have enough even respect for us that we are dealing in this situation. And also one for the same uterus, Ghatkopar charges hysterectomy 50,000 and some village charges 15,000, 20,000. So those are issues where they themselves they say, even South Bombay you go, they might charge 1.5 lakhs for the same uterus, same this thing. So there are lots of issues, like where do you draw the line regarding
Absolutely,
this?
I totally agree with you. These are probably the conflicting aspects. Get into this also. So you are absolutely right. These are real-time problems which I don't know how to answer this, and if people could probably give us some guidance about this, how do we answer this? I still have no answers for what you are saying is.
Also, if you are in full time.
Also, if you are in full time and if you have not opted for private practice, I think it is unprofessional for any person to go and do private practice, in the slide. That's being unprofessional. But talking about private practitioners, it has been my experience was when my mother was admitted in a very big hospital, very well-known hospital. It was this, suddenly I find there are some 10 referrals and I have to pay 500 rupees each for all the 10 consultants in a day. Wherein there was no need for that. Okay. Endocrinologist, physician, cardiologist, dermatologist, urologist, everybody would come and say, hi, hello, how are you? They will sign and they will go. So which means I have to pay for their consultation. So the question was, I scratch your back and you scratch my back. So that was the system in the private thing. I don't know how many Bombay hospitals have this system. But this was not in Bombay, but I'm sure the system exists in the private practice. So basically, as Madam just said, for a startup, for a starting person who's just starting practice, maybe this could give a small boost to the practice in the beginning. But I'm sure as you develop, as you grow, I think this system, one person should really talk to oneself and be professional in their practice. That's another thing. But there are absolutely no answers to what Madam said. Like for example, if you're a starting up and you have no practice at all, and you don't want to give money, you don't want to give kickback, you have no practice, you're sitting at home. What are you going to eat? What is the answer to this? So, the answer is, if you want to practice professionalism, all of us have to practice. You cannot have one group only talking about professionalism, whereas the 25% talking of professionalism and the remaining 75% are unprofessional. Then it won't work.
In simple words, it is the skill, good judgment and polite behavior that is expected from a person who is trained to do a job well. And so, like we are professionals, there are a number of other professionals. What makes it different? That doctors have to behave in a certain way, that if doctors charge money, that if you actually say for your consultation, you will take, I'm sorry, I'm being a devil's advocate, but I will have, suppose I've been trained, I've not practiced ever, but I've trained for maybe 15 years of my life to get a certain skill, and now I'm practicing that, and I'm practicing with judgment. It's called, most of medicine, practical medicine is about judgment calls, and that comes through training, and it's probably the only profession where the more grey hair you have, the better you are. Unlike in computer professionals, you sort of burn out at 30 or 32. So, if that person wants to charge money, why is that considered wrong by society? And then, if a lawyer charges 15 lakhs for one appearance or whatever, that's perfectly fine. He's a lawyer. But you are a doctor and I'm not supposed to charge. So that's just one thing. And secondly, I think, and I want to draw in my friend Natu sitting there in the corner, because you have some thoughts, I'm sure. How do we teach professionalism?
Yeah.
We can't teach it. I think according to me, it's about role models and it's about the way society is, and that's what I was trying to say. How do you teach this to a student? Now, do you have your thoughts? Any thoughts? Anything that has, or even Lakshmi? Yeah. Y'all are the ones who catch them. Dr. Shamvi is here. Y'all are the ones who catch them like raw. So how do we teach people? Sandhya, you're here too. How do we teach people professionalism? By being professional ourselves, right? So that means I personally, whenever I discuss this with youngsters, that's one thing I think we all, our generation, ancient people need to think is that our teachers have always told us, you horrible fellows, you don't do anything, you're not disciplined, you're so disgusting, look at us. So we should stop doing this for our younger generation. They're going to be different, it's a different generation. So, okay, then why is it that it's like this? Like again, that's what I said at the beginning. I think our profession does to a large extent reflect what is in society. So we need to, like Indrani said, it's not just two people behaving professionally or talking about good things. It has to be a societal change. That's one thing. And second, maybe if I could draw you all into the discussion while you are having tea, is how do we teach this? Lakshmi, or to anyone?
This is my personal opinion. Just get some fundamentals clear. I am a student of this college, joined in 76. Myself and Mubila from the same batch. I did my MS General Surgery, 1984. I am the first doctor in my family. No other exposure to medicine in my family. So then I set out into practice, private practice. And luckily for me, I could opt for part-time job in anatomy along with it. So these two things were on. My first exposure to private practice was that for me everything is for the first time. So when I met the practitioners, I started gradually realizing that it's more of M-O-N-E-Y than M-E-D-I-C-A-L. Medical was nowhere in picture. It's though it was just incidental. So I was wondering, 8.5 years of medicine. And here, I'm back to square one like a tea seller. It was lucky, I was fortunate enough to have one foot in anatomy. I took a decision, for the rest of my life, I will not be able to survive if I am on this sort of ground. I put both my feet in anatomy. Did my MS anatomy and now I'm here. Anyways, Dr. Pandya has come in, so it should be right for Dr. Pandya to express this.
And so that's why we started discussing a little bit about professionalism and people's opinion. Now, without further delay, I would like to call upon Dr. Pandya to kindly speak to us. Thank you, sir.
My sincere apologies. I was held up at the just-load because there was an emergency reference. And then I reached here about 10 minutes after the scheduled time, but I had made a mistake in understanding. So I went to the MLT and I sat through about 20 minutes of a talk on cardiomyopathy. So I'm very much better informed now on cardiomyopathy and cardiac disease. But that is at your expense, the expense of your patients and your time. So sincere apologies. It should not have happened, and I'm sorry for it. We organized this session today principally to seek your help. I understand that most of you are teachers with undergraduates and postgraduates under your care, and we need your help to inculcate some principles, like the principle that the gentleman who was talking when I came in was mentioning. It is unfortunate but true that medical practice has now deteriorated in many places into commercialism. And this is actually the gist of today's talk. There are a few slides which have been prepared. They will be on this computer. Please feel free to download or take off these slides and use them as they are, or after modification should you find that necessary, when you teach your students. I hope that they will be of some help to you in passing on the message to them. It's important that we pass this message on to them because they are still at an impressionable age, and with your help we hope that they will be guided along a path which is a little different from the path that most of our doctors coming from other medical colleges take. So let's start with the first slide, and you can see here there is a clear division of two attitudes. There is the attitude of professionalism, where you become a professional, a member of a profession, and there is the other attitude where medicine is converted into a business, as he was quite correctly pointing out. Instead of MEDICINE, it is MONEY in capital bold letters. Now let's get down to basic principles. The definitions are provided over here. What is professionalism? What is a profession? And the oaths that are taken by members of professions, whether they are from the medical fraternity or the legal community or priesthood. And in all these three callings, medicine, law and priesthood, there are certain basic principles, and these basic principles are common. The principles are listed over here, and these are all very, very simple, very, very rational principles. Very easy to enunciate, but apparently very difficult to follow. I don't know why it is difficult, but it is difficult. A profession is different, completely different from a trade. And what we are going to talk about today, what we are going to discuss today, is everything about the profession, which is almost a 180-degree variant from a trade. And even amongst, if you were to group categories of occupations, the first one would be the crudest of the lot, which is an occupation where you do a job, you earn your money as salary or whatever, and then you go home and forget all about everything else. So that's a simple, ordinary, workaday job. Then we have professions, and that is what all of us hope to belong to or claim to belong to. And professions are essentially intended to help. They are intended to be of service. And monetary gains are secondary to service. The primary motive is service. Whatever we gain monetarily or financially is of secondary importance. Now, professions regulate themselves. They are not regulated by law, but unfortunately in our country they are, but generally, by and large, professions regulate themselves. And there is a peer group at the top which lays down an ethical code, a professional code, and that code is binding on all those who will be members of that profession. So in the case of lawyers, it's the bar councils which lay down the code. There is, of course, the code of priesthood, which is prescribed by the religious leaders of the community to which that priest belongs. And as far as the medical area is concerned, we have the medical councils and the various bodies of doctors. Higher than an occupation in terms of service is a profession. But still higher, even higher than a profession, is a calling or a vocation. A vocation is is an entity where there is an inner urge to serve. You're not doing it primarily to make a living. You're doing it because you are compelled by an inner urge to serve. And you can see that vocations often involve service which may be at considerable cost to yourself. It may even cost your life. And yet, you do not shirk, you do not turn away from the cause because your inner impulse is so strong that it tells you, no, even under these conditions, I must serve. A very simple medical example is an epidemic. Say there's an epidemic of plague, and a person who is merely performing a service as an occupation will probably very quickly run away from the epidemic because he doesn't want to get infected, he doesn't want to get involved, and therefore he'd rather run away. It is an unfortunate fact that considerable numbers of the medical profession today would also run away. We had an example some years ago in Gujarat where there was a doubtful plague, and that city was very quickly drained of its doctors. The medical personnel just disappeared from that city because they were worried that they would catch the plague and succumb to it. Whereas which is against all codes of ethics, of medical ethics, every single code demands that you will serve your patient even at a cost to yourself. But if medicine had been chosen as a vocation because of an inner impulse which demands that I will serve these people, then you would stick around. And there are innumerable instances of doctors dying from epidemics. We've been studying the epidemic of plague which had struck Bombay from 1896 to about 1901, 1902. And there are so many doctors and nurses who succumbed to that disease. At that time, the only medical college in Bombay was the Grand Medical College, and the only teaching hospital was the J.J. Hospital. So the doctors and nurses from these two institutions bore the brunt of the infection. And if you visit the graveyard in Sivri, you will see the graves of doctors and nurses who died of the plague whilst treating their patients. That is vocation. And it is actually, it should be our intent to elevate our profession into a vocation. At the moment when a medical student joins the medical college, there is hardly any selection process which studies the aptitude and vocational impulse that pushes the student into medicine. There is hardly any test which is carried out. Whereas in the olden days, and we will come to that in a minute, students were very carefully selected, and only those who wanted to do medicine as a vocation would be selected as medical students. So essentially what we now need to do is to elevate the need or the impulse to become a doctor from the need merely to make millions and to get 5 Mercedes Benzes and 6 5-bedroom flats into a vocational impulse which says, I want to treat patients because they are sick. I want to try and help them get well if I can. If I can't help them to get well and if they're going to die anyhow, I'd like to make the transition from life to death as peaceful, as painless, as comfortable as possible. And that is the need of the hour. That is what we need to inculcate into our medical students at a very impressionable age, and that is where you come in as teachers. Now, there appears to be some kind of a doubt about ethics versus law. These are two completely different entities. Ethics concerns behavior. Ethics concerns attitude. The law is something which the state draws up and demands that you will conform to the law. Ethical principles forever have been always much higher than the demands of the law. Many times, what is legal may not necessarily be ethical. And the ethical doctor would prefer not to follow the dictate of the law in that particular event and rather stick to what his ethical principles demand. Now, in our country, the easiest example is that of abortion on demand. Abortion on demand is today legal in this country. But many doctors feel that unless the mother's life is at risk, abortion on demand should not be performed because it is taking away an innocent life. And therefore there are several doctors who will refuse to perform abortion on demand if the mother's life is not at stake. I know of instances where abortions are being performed at the drop of a hat, which is totally unethical and totally immoral. But there are doctors who quite cheerfully and willingly perform these kinds of abortions, and they earn in the process. So they have subordinated their vocational impulses to the need to earn a lot of money. And they justify this by saying that abortion on demand is legal and not breaking any law. So there is a very subtle but very clear distinction between the principles of ethics and the demands of law as the demands are laid down by the state. Now, a few words on the codes of medical ethics. We've had some historic codes, and we'll be coming to those in a minute or two. But these codes, many of which were laid down by very wise and very competent physicians and surgeons, these codes are the embodiment of all that is good in medicine. They emphasize the goodness and the good practices, and they condemn any practice that is not beneficial to the patient and the patient's family. So that is how these codes are laid down. And we have these historic codes, which we will come to in a minute. You can see some of the points which have been raised in, which are common to many of these historic codes. Sorry. Am I going to the long? Yeah. In India, we have this heritage. We have heritage of codes which are being laid down by several eminent doctors of the past. I've chosen two of them. One is a physician, Charak, and the other one is a surgeon, Sushruta. They are believed to have lived and worked somewhere around 600 BC, although some Indian experts claim that they were there around 2000 BC. It doesn't make any difference. They were BC, well over 2000 years ago. So long ago, there were these eminent physicians and surgeons who laid down ethical codes. And if you read the Samhitas, which are compendia of the teachings of these masters, Charak and Sushruta, but they are not the compendia just of these two individuals, they are the compendia of the teachings of Charak and Sushruta and of several generations of their pupils. So all these have been compiled together into what are called Samhitas. And these Samhitas, as you would expect in India, were originally in Sanskrit, but we are lucky in that we have English translations available of both Charak and Sushruta Samhita. And they are well worth studying, because there's so much that we need to learn from them. There's so much that we have lost because we have disowned the principles that Charak and Sushruta and their schools laid down. They have laid down codes for who should be a student, who should be a teacher, what are the practices that teachers and students should follow, and so on and so forth. Some of those principles that they have laid down are over here. Now I come to a satirical blog which has been put up by somebody, and this person has imagined a conversation between Hippocrates. Hippocrates was 400 BC, and the modern medical students. So there's an audience of young modern medical students, and there is Hippocrates standing talking to them. And Hippocrates starts pronouncing the beginning of the Hippocratic Code. And so he starts by saying, I swear by Apollo and by Panacea. Now Apollo was the greatest of the Greek gods. Panacea and Hygeia were the daughters of Aesculapius, who was considered the god of health by the Greeks. As he is talking of Apollo and Panacea, the medical students who form the audience starts talking in the Hindi language about how this guy is nuts. What's he talking about? And because of a lack of knowledge and information on history, and because of a lack of knowledge and interest in mythology, instead of relating to the Apollo of the Greeks, they are relating themselves and Hygeia, who was the Greek goddess of hygiene, and Panacea, who was the Greek goddess of drugs and medicines and cures. They are talking about Apollo Hospital in India and about the Panacea drug company, which had funded the association meeting that had just got over. So it's a satirical statement which has been made by the person who has written this blog. This is what Hippocrates actually said in the Hippocratic Oath. And note that this is not the entire Hippocratic Oath. I've just chosen a few quotations from there. And one of the important principles that he lays down is that you cannot be a good doctor. You cannot be a good doctor unless you are also a humane individual. You have to have within you the quality of humanity in order to be a doctor. And he also enunciates that medicine is not merely a science. Medicine is also an art. And it's the art of medicine that is at least as important as the science of medicine. And then the second line is, of course, a quotation which you will find anywhere, wherever you look up Hippocrates, you will find this statement, life is long, and so on. Now, one of the driving principles of this division which has been created in this institution, the division of humanities, is to try and inculcate into our youngsters the great need to develop interest and enthusiasm in the arts, in literature, in painting, in drama, in dance, in the various arts. There is a very important reason why it is important for us to get into the arts as against merely thriving on the science of medicine. It is when we get into the arts that we enrich ourselves. It is when we go into history and when we study philosophy and we think about what we have studied that we become more complete doctors. We become better doctors, and we deal much more effectively with our patients. Here's one example of a terrible, but very common behavior. When you deal, if I was a consultant at the KEM hospital, and I'm also a consultant at a private hospital, like the Just Law, then very often my behavior will be completely different in these two hospitals. In the KEM, I will be abrupt. I may even be rude, and I have no time for my patients. So I will just come, maybe cast a cursory glance, listen to what my resident says, and that is also with just one ear, because with the other ear I'm listening to something on my cell phone or whatever, and within seconds I will have passed by that patient and the next, as if these patients are burdens to me. On the contrary, when I go to the Just Law hospital, I will be all sweetness. I will have all the time in the world for the patients. I will be very polite. I will be very kind. I will spare time for them. I will discuss with them. I will answer their questions. So two completely different kinds of behavior. The same person, the same profession. Now, what is the consequence of the fact that we are losing professionalism? And here are some of the consequences. Patients are not idiots. Patients are not fools. They are not lacking in intelligence. They can see what you are doing. And very soon, they will start losing faith. We are already seeing this. If you are in private practice, when a patient comes to you, he doesn't talk to you. The first thing he does is to put a thick file in front of you and say, "Doc, go through this file." And what does that file contain? It contains the opinions of the 6 doctors he has seen before coming to see you. It contains hundreds of tests which have been carried out because of those 6 doctors demanding those tests. And he wants you to go through all that before he will tell you what the problem is. And it's very difficult at times to tell the patient, "Look, I'm not going to treat the file, I'm going to treat you. So for God's sake, you tell me what is wrong with you. Don't show this file to me. I will look after that file later at my own convenience. But first, you talk to me, you tell me." Doctors are now becoming untrustworthy. They don't have faith in us. That is why you will see this phenomenon, not so much in the KEM, because these patients are too poor. They can't afford to go to Doctor 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. But the patients in private hospitals, very often, they will take your opinion and you tell them in all honesty what should be done. And the next thing you know is that they've gone to Dr. X, Dr. Y, Dr. Z, because they don't trust you. And this is one of the consequences that we see very commonly as a consequence of the fact that we are no more adhering to the tenets of our profession. We are no more showing that we have a vocation. We are following a vocation and not a trade. And of course, we lose all our values, and that is why you saw why I will behave differently with a hospital patient in KEM than against what I will behave in a patient in Just Law hospital. It also leads to all kinds of unhealthy practices. And the last line here just lists a few of them. If you have the experience of private practice, you will know what all these things are referring to. Actually, even in the KEM, you will see middle-class patients coming over here who will tell you that, "Look, this is how my doctor fleeced me outside. This is what my doctor did to me," or "This is what the scanner did to me," or "This is what the pathology laboratory did to me." So there are all kinds of problems which follow lack of professionalism. And what does all this lead to? It ends up with very senior doctors who are so poor that the only thing they have is tons and tons and tons of money. Why do I say that they are so poor? I have seen doctors who are 75, 80, 85 years of age who are still practicing from 8 a.m. to 10 p.m. 8 a.m. to 10 p.m. at the age of 70, 75, 80. And you ask them, why are you doing all this? The answer is, well, what else is there to do? There is such a poverty of width of vision, of width of interest. They have no interest. They're not interested in reading books. They're not interested in writing poetry. They're not interested in attending performances of dances or music or theatre. All that they know is the practice of medicine. And so even at the fag end of their lives, they're still working 10 to 12 hours in hospitals. I'm going to leave you with these are the last 3 slides. 2 of them are quotations from a judge, from an American judge at that. This was Justice Tuttle. These quotations were provided to me by a very, very eminent and a very literate and a very scholarly Indian lawyer, Mr. Nani Palkhiwala, who unfortunately is no more. But if you ever get the chance to read any of his books, not books on law, not books on accounting, but the other books, the extracurricular books that he wrote, please read them. He was an intellectual of the highest caliber, and he pointed out this quotation by Justice Tuttle. And this is how Justice Tuttle advised anyone who wishes to be a professional. What does it mean to be a professional? And I will leave you to read it because it's very, very interesting. As he points out, we have to earn because we need to survive. But that is not our chief goal. Our chief goal is service. Then he also addresses the problem, how much should you charge your patient? And what is the worth of a profession? And that's the second part. It turns out that there is no right price for service. The value of a professional is nothing or it is infinite. Now, Justice Tuttle advised us on what does it mean to be a professional, but then he was not talking to an audience of doctors. He was talking to an audience of lawyers, and he was advising them on what it means to be a professional. The last slide will show you what it means to be a doctor. This is a very, very famous painting. As you can see, it was painted in 1887 by a very famous British artist, Sir Luke Films. The title of this painting is very simple, 2 words, The Doctor. And if you want to see the original, it's in the Tate Gallery in London. It epitomizes what it means to be a doctor. Look carefully at the painting. What do you see in the painting? You see a sick child, right in the center of the painting. All the light is on the sick child. Behind the sick child, there is the father who's standing in the dark corner. And this father has his head bowed. He's worried. What's going to happen to my child? The mother is even more worried, so she's sobbing away with her head on the table. and there is the doctor. He's not in a hurry. He's not running to the next patient. He's not eager to run from there. He's sitting very patiently with his hand under the chin, watching, trying to see what can be done. If you look in the front, on a table, there is a mortar and a pestle. Remember, we are talking of the late 1800s. There were no pharmaceutical companies, so doctors had to make their own medicines. So he has prepared some preparation with the mortar and pestle, given it to the child, and he's waiting and watching to see what the effect of that medicine is. Is the child going to improve, or is the child going to worsen? He has been sitting there the whole night. How do you know that he's been sitting there the whole night? If you look on our left, there is a lamp which has been lit. So he must have been there when night has fallen. If you look on the right, you see dawn is breaking and the rays of the sun are just beginning to come in. So he's been sitting there for some hours, late at night, waiting and watching to see what's happening to his patient. He's patient, he's dignified, he's not in a hurry, he wants to watch what the effect of his drugs are, and he wants to see if he can do anything further to improve the condition of this child. No hurry, no bustle, no I have to run, I've got so many other patients waiting for me. This, ladies and gentlemen, is the essence of what it means to be a doctor. Thank you. I know I have eaten up a lot of your time by making you wait, but I'd be very grateful if some of you would convey to us your own ideas, suggestions, opinions, advice. Because we want to learn from you. All of us here. We have a few minutes. Please. Yes.
Actually, I'm a physical therapist. Dr.M.V.L.Kothari has been a great mentor and philosopher guide. I think he passed on so many beautiful things, spoken and unspoken. And what he really gave me was books. I wish we all read. I share with my physiotherapy students the work of Dr. Albert Schweitzer. Sir put slides and it was written, the family of Baba Ambe, Rani Bang, Abhay Bang, Mabel and Ravindra and Arole, Basutkars, Ida Scudder, Paul Brand, you, Dr. Mary Varghese, you name people, Victor Rambo, Dr. Chandy, they have lived vocation. Doctor Beyond Borders, Medical Sans Frontiers. These are people who are living the vocation. The Jungle Doctor of Lamborghini. I wish everybody reads the books. More from the Premier Forest. And the list goes on. So if we read, and in fact Dr. Albert Schweitzer says that I don't know what your destiny may be, but those who will be really happy are those who really serve. That's what Dr. Albert Schweitzer says. So I think I'll be blessed that in some way we are in the medical profession. Yes, we are blessed. We have come here to serve, to help and to heal. And let us rise to that vocation. Thank you.
Dr. Albert Schweitzer, he was a multifaceted personality. He was a world-famous expert on the music of Bach, Johann Sebastian Bach. He was a theologist of repute. And of course, he was the ideal physician. And one of his immortal sayings is about pain. And he says, all of us from time to time suffer pain. When we suffer pain, we are now privileged because we have experienced what it means to be in pain. And he said that the more you have suffered, the more privileged you are. And it is for people like us who have suffered pain to form what is known the fellowship of those who bear the mark of pain. Now what is this fellowship intended for? The fellowship is intended for you to go out to others who are in pain and to help relieve them, because you have experienced pain. You know what it means to be in pain. Now go out and help other people who are in pain. Albert Schweitzer. Wonderful example given by you. Yes, ma'am.
Hello. First of all, sir, thank you so much for the beautiful presentation. Myself, I am a resident from the PSM department. Sir, though I believe a lot of things which you spoke right now, I kind of belong to the left-hand side of thinking also. When I listen to you, we are talking about the medical profession as a single entity in most of our discussion. When we see the bigger picture, the medical profession is only a small part of other different professions in the world. And whether we accept it or not, the survival of the fittest is the rule of the world. Though we talk about so many of the history things, and we saw, we never see a medical, any child or any kid joining a medical profession only with the thought of, earning the money. When we see the first year students, and most of them, as I have experienced, they join with the service money. But some thoughts come to my mind are, is it because of the money or because of the situations they go through? Like, I have a personal experience when I was in internship. I was working for 24 to 36 hours a day, overworked, overburdened, and we have codes of how doctors should behave with the patients. But do we have a code of how a doctor should be treated by the society? And we are more worked and overburdened by, compared to many other professions. But still, every time a topic of health comes, health is a basic necessity. And doctor is supposed to be service-minded, but still doctor is a human being too. And we live in a society where we talk about sustainable development and every kind of development. But are we leading to the development of the doctors? We talk about rural postings, where the whole world is moving forward. And are we increasing the skills of doctors once they are doctors? Are we still, they are just, suppressing their skills or their ability to learn? We saw that picture where we talked about doctors being poor at the age of 70, not interested in many arts. But is it really the, loss of interest, or was he very interested when he joined medicine, or when he was before a medical student, was he really poor in these qualities, or was he really interested in all the literature, all the art, science, and all the beauties of life? But his profession, because of the service it needs, the commitment it needs, working for 48 hours, 96 hours, and this is what has taken all the, all these beauties and the gems of life from his life, because he is more interested in giving more service to his patient. And we saw about that painting, that was beautiful, and I do appreciate that. But when we talk about the quality, doesn't the quantity come into the picture when we are living in a third world country like India? We talk about private hospitals paying for flower and the public hospitals paying the thorn. But when we see the quantity, it do matter, right? Because we live in a country where we have to manage a lot of people. And one single doctor is supposed to serve 30,000 people. When you spend one day, I'm just taking a metaphor, I know that's a metaphor, but still, if you can spend so much of time with one patient, what about the other patients? And I think it's not loss of ethics or loss of professionalism that is leading to the degradation, but it is just, there are different factors. To improve that, talking about professionalism only to the doctors, I personally doesn't feel is the only thing that is needed. And as the say goes, to improve when people are faced with so many problems, either we can talk about all these things, either they can fight, where most of the times we don't survive. We are with this profession, doctor over there and myself, we choose something which is not very mainstream clinical and go into something which we believe in. So I don't think the doctors are wrong as the media puts or as the people talk. I don't think doctors are out of profession. It's just the way you perceive things. If you are in that shoes, you do understand, and that's what I feel.
We've been conducting workshops on medical ethics some years ago, different parts of the country, and some of these were half-day workshops, some of these were 1.5-day workshops, usually on Saturdays and Sundays, because that's the time when people can come and attend these workshops. Different cities in India. And at the end of each workshop, we would have a period for discussion, when the audience would tell the speakers, exactly as you have told us right now, what you feel and what are your experiences. And there were two questions which always came up. Every meeting that we had, somebody would raise one of those two questions. And the two questions were as follows. The first question was, you guys are telling us that we should be honest, that we should be sincere, we should be hardworking, we should be ethical. What about the rest of the country? We have judges who are corrupt, we have lawyers who are corrupt, we have policemen who are corrupt, we have principals, schools and colleges who are corrupt. If I want a room where I can start my practice, I have to pay unaccounted money. What we in India are very fond of calling black money. Where am I going to get that black money? Unless I earn black money by charging others and not giving them a receipt. So everywhere, wherever I turn, I see corruption. And you are telling me, be honest, be truthful, be sincere, be hardworking. How am I supposed to function in a milieu which is totally corrupt? How can I behave in a straightforward manner? The answer that it took us a while to formulate the answer to that, but the answer that we came up with was this. And that is that merely because somebody else is committing a wrong, it doesn't justify our committing a wrong. Just because somebody else is committing a murder or is committing a rape and escapes and gets away with it and never gets any punishment, that doesn't give me a justification to commit a rape or to commit a murder. We have had the great advantage which has been denied to the vast majority of our countrymen and countrywomen. We have had 10 to 12 years of school. We've had 2 years of pre-medical college education. We've had 5.5 years of undergraduate medical education. And then if we go into post-graduation, we've had another 3 to 5 years of education, which adds up to a pretty long period of education. If at the end of that period, and at the end of all this education that we have received, if we are going to argue that because everyone else is corrupt, it gives us also a license to be corrupt, then this education is meaningless. This education should in fact tell us, no matter what the rest of the world is doing, you do the right thing. This is what that education should teach us. You have to suffer, you suffer, but you don't deviate from the straight and narrow path. That is what education tells us. Education also tells us, if we take care to widen our education, if we also study history and biography, we will come across innumerable numbers of heroes, not only in the medical field but in many, many other fields, who have suffered and who have even died for the sake of principles, because they believed in those principles and they followed them. So the plea that we are making is, it is difficult. Circumstances are not conducive to good behavior. But we have to rise above the circumstances and we have to show by example that even under these conditions, you can be an excellent professional and you can be an excellent human being. That's what we need to do.
So if I may put it, sometimes as they say, the context changes, the demands change, the thought process also changes. So what there sometimes looks to be a lot of difference in the thought process, as it becomes at times too sermonic to say that, in current times, is it right to say not to think about money, not to think about self, not to think about having a decent life, for to say? Why is it that sacrifice has to be, or just service has to be the main motto behind my... everyone has their own thought processes and principles, so to say. My principles and my behavior pattern might not be the same as somebody else's, but what probably makes me better or worse than the other is also something which is probably debatable. So how do you sort of would be able to answer this dilemma in the mind?
I don't think anyone is better or worse than anyone else. Partly it is a matter of circumstance. If you are starving and you are on the brink of dying from starvation, you will get food by whatever means is available to you. And it's difficult to criticize somebody who steals a loaf of bread to save his child from dying. It's very difficult. It is wrong that he steals, but under his circumstances, he had no other option. So he stole. So the plea that is being made is not a plea to behave like a saint or to be like God. We can't. We are human beings. We are subject to all the frailties that human beings are subjected to. The plea is to try and keep improving, to try and be a little better tomorrow than we were yesterday, and to try and ride over difficult circumstances. Of course it's difficult to be honest. Of course it's difficult to be truthful. Sometimes when you're honest and truthful, you get a beating. But that doesn't mean that we should not strive to be honest and we should not strive to be truthful. So we keep trying. We will fail. From time to time, we will fail. But it is important for us to recognize that we have failed and the next time try and make sure that you don't fail. We are all human beings. So I think it's a conscious struggle to keep elevating your personal standards. That's what it amounts to. Young ladies here, no comments? Criticism?
What this lady, doctor earlier was talking is the mental health of a doctor also. That doctor, I will have good energy in the morning, but I've seen work so much. I'm sensitive in the morning, by the end of the day I become insensitive. So how do we tackle this?
It's very difficult. Until and unless we achieve sainthood, it's difficult because we are human beings. We are subject to all the stresses and strains that any human being is subject to. There will be times when we will be able to go beyond all the restrictions due to circumstances. We will supervene, we will go over them. There will be times when we will give way. But the attempt is each time to be a little better than you were last time. That's all. We are not saints, we are still human beings. If we reach that state, then you won't be called a human being anymore, you will be called a saint. And we are still a long way to go before we reach that status. But at least we should try, we make the attempt. Yes, ma'am.
Thank you very much for the lecture. I just want to make one comment. So what I feel is the doctor community has to support the doctors in times of crisis. Like we're talking about not making money and all, I agree completely to that. But there are times when a doctor goes through a crisis situation Like for example, a boy coming from a very poor socio-economic status has struggled and reached the age of 30 or 32 and then has a major illness in life and he has no money absolutely. So I think the doctor community has to support another doctor who's going through this. Maybe it will give him some form of security, not to make money in a rush. Something like that we have to offer to our own community.
Taking from, sorry, no, I would like to take on from her discussion. Probably looking at professionalism in the institute. Let us keep aside, outside whatever happens. Maybe if somebody says, my excellence should have my remuneration proportionate to that. That is apart. Let us keep it apart. But from the condition of the overwork, what they talked about, and even he said about being sensitive and fresh and kind in the morning, and as the day goes by, because of overwork and all, they get sort of rough. Somewhere I feel it is our responsibility as teachers to be role models, and which is, I think it's deficient in some way, that it is not sufficient for these people to look at us and our behavior or whatever. So do you think as role models we have failed as teachers?
Let me answer that first. Circumstances are not favorable to what we want to achieve. We want to be honest, we want to be ethical, we want to be truthful, we want to be generous, we want to help all patients. The poorer the patient, the more we want to help them. But circumstances don't help us to do what we want to do and to achieve what we want to achieve. A very simple example. Treat a patient in KEM hospital. Treat an identical patient with the identical stage of the identical disease in Jaslow hospital. The facilities available in KEM are relatively small. The facilities available in Jaslow hospital are immense. It's easier to treat the patient there. It's more difficult to treat the patient here because you are struggling against so many odds which are against you. But the true heroism is in continuing to do your best for this patient who is in distress. You may succeed, you may fail. That's life. But at least at the end of the day, you have the satisfaction that you have done your best for this patient. And I think eventually that is all that matters. If you have done your best under the circumstances in which you are placed, who can criticize you? Who can fault you? You can't be faulted for the circumstances around you, that they are not of your making. So it's difficult, it's very difficult. And I don't know that anyone is an ideal person. All of us have our own shortcomings. Somewhere we are deficient. The greatness lies in our recognizing our deficiencies and trying to be better tomorrow than we are today. That's all that we can do. We are not gods. We are still human beings. We have our feelings, we have our difficulties, we have our faults, we have our handicaps. But if we keep trying, tomorrow, if this happens again, I will do it a little differently. I will try and do it a little better. And I think that's how we grow, and that's how we try. We may fail today, we may even fail tomorrow, we may fail day after tomorrow also. But at least we have tried, we have struggled. I think that's all that you can ask for a human being. We are not gods. Sorry ma'am, you'll have to remind me about your
Helping the colleagues, helping the junior colleague.
Yes. You said that somebody who at the age of 30 years is in trouble and needs help, and so there should be a mechanism by which this kind of help can be rendered. Of course, you are absolutely correct. And certainly in a country like India, where so many of us come from poor backgrounds, so many of our students, so many of our doctors come from very, very poor backgrounds, this is even more important. And it is a pity that society as a whole is not taking care of the medical professional. Partly this is because we are to blame. Partly it is because some of us, have been so greedy and have been so vicious in making our millions that society has no sympathy for us. If you talk to an average middle class individual, if you talk to an average middle class person 50 years ago, and if you talk to them today and ask, what do you think about a doctor? 50 years ago, they would have said a doctor is like God. Today, they will say, beware of a doctor. So, attitudes in general outside the medical profession are hardened because so many of us within the medical profession are misbehaved. And that is a tragedy, because the good people in the medical profession, like the person you just referred to, at the age of 30, having worked honestly, having worked sincerely, he's in trouble. And now he needs help. But society at large is not inclined to help, because they tar all doctors with the same brush. All doctors are corrupt, all doctors are greedy, all doctors are out to fleece you. And so this one good doctor suffers because of that. And unfortunately, the medical profession at large is not geared to helping a doctor who's in trouble. That is also true. And there we are to blame. You can't blame society, that's our fault. So I think a lot of things need to change, a lot of things need to improve, and the point that you have made is very, very valid. It's a
There's still a lot of goodness. I'm talking my personal example. I go to the family physician and I say, how much I have to pay? He says, no, nothing, thank you. I go to the ophthalmologist for my eye. I say, sir, doctor, how much I have to pay? He says, no, nothing, thank you. I go to the pathologist. And of course, I need all these things in the grace of whatever God, and very rarely. And I tell the pathologist, the blood tests are done, how much I have to pay? No, nothing, thank you. Amazing. Means the world is still beautiful. If there is grace, the grace will rebound, or it will come. So I think, but still we need to take care of our medical fraternity, yes. I think I don't know whether it's ethics, some part of ethics that doctors don't take money for treatment from each other, or?
Yes, that's the term used is professional ethics. So a lawyer will not charge another lawyer, and a doctor will not charge another doctor, or relatives of a doctor, and so on. But coming to the main point which you raised, I think you've been extraordinarily fortunate.
Exactly, yes.
It's the exceptional individual who will recognize your goodness and will respond with goodness. Somebody who knows you for years and years and years will do it automatically, because he knows what you are and what you are doing and what you stand for. But a stranger, if you go to a strange doctor who knows nothing about you, the reception may be slightly different. So, I don't know. But I wish all doctors were like the doctors you encounter. I honestly wish. I pray actually.
So one question that I wanted to raise is that the doctors being under this Consumer Protection Act, one part of the society has accepted that they are consumers, and it's very difficult in this situation to not be like being a service provider in a way that the consumers, because they keep on shopping So it's really, I think it shouldn't be made it to be said that it's wrong for a person like to render services and asking for the proper remuneration, whatever. Because it's the patient who comes to you. If he doesn't want, there are various things available to him. It's one way to look at it. Because whoever says today that doctors are God and they are really being hypocritical. They don't really believe it. They are just buttering you up so that you take care of them. Because what I have been seeing is that when they say it, you take it with a pinch of salt. But it's becoming a service where they are expecting also professional and results, because they are just looking at the results. They are not looking at the process. They are not looking at anything. When things go wrong, we have seen so many instances nowadays in newspapers where mobs come and the doctors, small private nursing homes are messed up. So I think there should be a change to look at the things in a different way from our perspective. That's what point I was trying to make.
This has been a problem which is a problem for thousands of years actually. What should govern my behavior? Should your behavior govern my behavior, or should I have an intrinsic behavior of my own, irrespective of any other external factor? This is the crux of the problem. If society at large is not supportive of the medical profession, should the medical profession now have a license to abuse society at large by unethical practices, by bad behavior, by corruption, by fleecing the patient? So I think the question is essentially one of your own moral values. Those values should not be influenced by anything outside, by any extrinsic factor, to use a medical term. It is an intrinsic behavior. It's a behavior which wells up from my being. And if you treat me well, that's fine. If you treat me badly, that's also fine. There was a very famous Canadian physician who eventually migrated to England and died in England. His name was Sir William Osler. He became the Regius Professor of Medicine at Oxford after having been Professor of Medicine at Johns Hopkins in America. And he has written many books, but the title of one of his essays was Equanimitas. That's a Latin term. The English translation is equanimity. The meaning of equanimity is you behave in the manner that you behave irrespective of extrinsic factors. You have an inner calm, an inner peace, and that governs your behavior. Because you have behaved well with me, I am not going to be extra good to you. Because you have behaved badly with me, I am not going to be rough with you. I am still going to behave with you, human being to human being. So that is equanimity. And I think that is a virtue which is well worth cultivating in all of us. Then the extrinsic factors go away. And whatever governs our behavior is from outside, from within. It is true that doctors are now sued at the drop of a hat, even in India. It is true that individuals and mobs take to violence and they smash doctors, they smash their nursing homes, they smash their hospitals, they destroy the creation of a lifetime of labor. It is true, it happens. But because they behave that way, do we have a right to behave the same way? That is the question. So it all depends on you, depends on your philosophy.
So by being good to the people who are bad, are you taking away the more good that we are supposed to be good to the more people? We have positive, enforcement, negative enforcement. If you are good to a bad person, doesn't it lead a wrong message? Doesn't it lead to in a wrong way? Anyway,
yeah, but the example he showed was that for an imagined wrong, it may not even be true. For an imagined wrong, the relatives believe that your treatment was faulty and that's why his patient died. They are not going to bother to even inquire into whether the patient was going to die anyhow. Even the world's greatest physician could not have saved him. But the patient died in your nursing home, therefore I'm going to destroy your nursing home because you killed my patient. That's the psychology. And mob psychology is always irrational. There's no rationality to it. That's why it's mob psychology. They just behave on impulse. So on impulse, they come and destroy what you have created over 40 years of labor. Your clinic, your nursing home, your operation theatre, whatever you have created, they've destroyed in half an hour, they leave ruins and walk away. And your entire life is gone now. So under such circumstances, that is what he's asking. But this is the condition.
I know there are a lot of angst and everybody, if we are dealing with difficult situations, difficult answers, things will have to wind up here. Thanks a lot. Thank you, sir. I thank and end this session by thanking all the audience who took out their precious time. I know we have been a little delayed because of unprecedented circumstances. I thank the Department of Pharmacology for the auditorium they provided. I thank all the people who are involved in conducting this session, and thank you all. We are looking forward for future sessions like this as well. Thanks.